Welcome everyone, and today we will see another exciting game played by Sultan Khan. And for this video again I've chosen Sultan Khan's games because when I did research on the internet looking at Sultan Khan's books or videos or annotated games, I couldn't find too many material on Sultan Khan. Therefore I thought it may be good to do a kind of a detailed analysis of his games and share it with all you viewers. Alright, so let us get into this game. This game is played in 1930-31 in Hastings tournament, and this is played with the white pieces Edward Colle. Edward Colle, Colle kind of is well known for his opening which is named as a Colle system, and as black we have Sultan Khan. So let's get into the game. Game starts with d4, knight f6, knight f3, e6, e3, g6, bishop d3, bishop to g7, knight b to d2, d5, knight e5, and now a6. Now a6 is an unusual move in this position, not very clear on the objective of a6. A standard continuation in such a position would be to play something like c5, and after c3 knight b to d7, and after knight to f3 knight takes knight, knight takes knight, knight d7, f4, knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, and b6, and after castles you can simply continue with the move f6, and we have a almost equal position. White may have a better light squared bishop, but overall the position is quite equal. Getting back to the game, Sultan Khan played a6, f4, strengthening the knight, c5, and then c3. Usually c5 is always replied by c3 in this kind of a Colle setup. Knight to c6, queen to f3, queen to c7, short castles, b6, queen to h3, bishop to b7, knight to f3, and here Sultan Khan played knight to d8. Another move which we can consider is castles, and after knight to g5 I feel maybe black can continue with perhaps something like h6 and followed by capture of knight on e5, and the position will be balanced. But Sultan Khan wanted to avoid any kind of castling on the king side where it may be subject to attack, and he kind of played a little bit defensively next couple of moves, starting with knight d8, which controls f7. So after knight g5, f7 is overprotected. Then we have queen to d6, which is also another prophylactic move, which basically keeps an eye on e6, and then bishop to d2. Now by black's position is cramped, so it is good to go for some exchanges. Therefore knight e4, with the threat of playing the pawn to f6. After bishop captures on e4, we have pawn captures on e4, and since the knight had moved from the f6 square, the h7 pawn was not supported, so knight takes on h7. And now Sultan Khan played knight c6, wanting to exchange another pair of knights. Now he has to take this, since his knight is kind of pinned, he has to figure out a way to get the knight out. So therefore queen h4 with the threat of knight to f6, check, thus getting out of the pin. So Sultan Khan takes his option to exchange queens, and most of Sultan Khan games he was more comfortable with the queens off the board. So queen takes on e7, and then knight takes on e7, and now knight g5. So it kind of looks like white has comfortably got a pawn and is better. So some complications arise with the move f6. So now the knights are forked. So white continues with knight takes e6, where there are a couple of threats. The g7 bishop is threatened, and then there's also a check on c7. Sultan Khan picks up the knight, f takes on e5, and now white has an important choice to make in this position. Either you can pick up the knight or the bishop on g7, or he can go knight c7. So if he picks up the bishop on g7, then he will simply be a pawn up in the position. If he doesn't do that, then he may have to compromise by having maybe two pawns up, but having two pieces, giving two pieces for the rook. So let us look at both the lines. The first line which may look at is knight takes on g7 check and king takes on f7. Now white has to find this important continuation, otherwise the knight is simply trapped, and this important continuation, you can, if you want, you can pause the video and try to find it, is f5, and after king takes on g7, which is virtually forced, f6 check, king f7, and after f takes on e7, king takes on e7, d takes on c5, b takes on c5, and c4. We have kind of reached a position, and if you count the number of pawns, we've got 7 pawns for white and 5 pawns for black. So 2 clear pawns up, but it is an opposite colored bishop ending. But I would certainly kind of favor in this position to play white, because you can kind of play without any risk, and you can play this position for 2 results, and black doesn't have that luxury. So Sultan Khan, even being a good endgame player, might find it very difficult to hold this position. So this would have been probably the best alternative. Instead, Colle went for the more complicated knight c7 check, and after king d7, knight takes rook, bishop takes rook, d takes e5. So 8 pawns again for white, 5 pawns for black. Even this position, I feel, is very good for white, because even the 2 pieces are there for the rook, but there are way too many pawns in compensation. Knight f5, rook a to d1, king e7, c4, creating a space for the bishop, rook to d8, and now g4, just kicking out the knight. And here Sultan Khan plays knight h4, which is a double-edged move, and it is a very difficult move to play because the knight doesn't have very many squares. So the knight remains out of play for some time on h4, and that kind of allows some exchanges as well. So after that, bishop c3 was played. Now basically white wants to exchange a pair of rooks, so that is he doesn't have to do more defense, and then one can continue the position. Rook d3 is a strong move, an important move in this position, because the rook on d3 cannot be taken immediately, because it will allow a lot of counterplay for black. For example, if the rook was taken, rook takes on d3, e takes on d3, and if rook to d1 as a sample variation, knight f3 checking f2, bishop to e4, and now something like a4, knight takes on h2, king g3, knight f3, a5, b takes on a5, bishop takes on a5, king e6, and so on. So this position, on the face of it, it looks like basically there are 4 pawns for black, 6 pawns for white. So technically the position is equal, but black does have 2 bishops, and his pieces are entrenched into white's position. So it is extremely complicated position, this, and very difficult to play over the board. So bishop c3, after bishop c3, rook d3, Colle is trying to avoid any complications and looking for simplification. So even king f2, the idea of king f2 is to play the king to e2 and then exchange rooks, and then thus win a pawn. So, and that once a critical pawn, d pawn falls, I think the game will be quickly decided by white. So immediately black lashes out with g5, and there are a lot of lines here, but let us look at the main game. f5 was played, And now bishop went to h6 because the threat was f6, of course, which would have been forking the bishop and the king. Rooks were exchanged, and now the king goes to g3. Now, of course, the knight now is secured. Bishop to e4 does two things. Number one is secures the d pawn and also blockades the e pawn, because once the e pawn moves in front, then the bishop can go to d2 where it can attack g5 and also blockade the d pawn as well, and that would be very good for white. So this bishop on e4 is like a thorn in the flesh, which does not allow any counterplay for white. Rook f2. So here I think Colle kind of starts to drift a little bit. He doesn't play the best moves, and he doesn't play the right plan. Sultan Khan plays this bishop maneuver, which is almost his trademark maneuver. When, like, even in the last game that I had shown, the bishop did this kind of a maneuver going, one square at a time. So he's doing a similar maneuver, trying to reposition the bishop to c7 in this case. So rook f1, king e8, getting the king out of the way. a4. Okay, I mean, here a4 was played in a timely manner. Otherwise, white probably had even the move b5 if he wanted to play instead of king e8. So after a4, a5, rook to f2, bishop to e7, rook to f1, bishop to d8, and now bishop to c7 is the next move. This is a mistake, because now this allows white king to enter the black king to enter the position, because so far the king was completely blockaded, because all the squares g6, f6, e6 and d6 were controlled by the pawns, and suddenly now the e6 square, f7 square and g6 square become available. So f6 is a series of mistakes, first among the series of mistakes that Colle makes. And after king f7, suddenly it looks like the knight will come to play via g6, and then the e pawn will fall. Once the e pawn falls, then it is only a matter of time before the f pawn also falls, and suddenly white's position will not be as good anymore. So this, I think, is a turning point in the game, where Colle kind of hurried up instead of patiently remanuring his pieces to the best squares. It was always very difficult to do. Okay, here he just goes wrong again. e6 just blunders the pawn. King takes e6, and now a move which I cannot understand. Bishop e5, and now king takes e5 and f7. Now knight comes back with g6 controlling f8, f8, knight takes f8, rook takes f8, bishop e7, attacking the rook, and the rook has absolutely nowhere to go because d2 is looming. Therefore rook f2 is kind of forced in this position. And after bishop c6, making space for the king on e5 and also attacking the a4 pawn, Colle gives a check with rook f5, king e6, and after king f2, which is the final straw on the camel's back, as they say, black simply played bishop e4, which trapped the rook, and white resigned in this position. So quite a kind of a complex middle game, which had a lot of maneuvering from both players, but Sultan Khan was able to have a deeper understanding of this position and able to create the right blockade with his three minor pieces, thus not allowing any source of counterplay for the white rook, which frustrated Colle, and in the end he kind of played a series of very weak moves, starting with the move f6, which would have been very tough for him. I think after that the position just collapsed, and white just blundered the rook in the end, and black sealed the victory very easily towards the end. A very interesting game, and a very deep game, I would say. So it kind of gives an insight of some of the very positional masterpieces that Sultan Khan has played in his in a short span of a few years that he played chess. Alright, thank you so much for viewing the video, and if you like the video, please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you again next time. Till then, bye bye.